And just like that, we got the official announcement in our inboxes, Zaiem. The Seattle Kraken have acquired a 2026 and 27 first round pick, a 25 second pick, and forward Michael Eyssimont in exchange for forwards Oliver Bjorkstrand, Yanni Gourde, and a 26 fifth round pick.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Going to get all of the business from the network out of the way, Zaiem, because we have plenty of things to talk about regarding the Seattle Kraken. So today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Okay, Zaiem, you and I, we engaged in a very interesting debate regarding goaltending, which we'll get to, but as that was spirited, very spirited, darling. But as that was going on, then we get some news that's quite literally developing as we are recording. We already knew we were going to talk about Yanni Gourde, but Zaiem, lead us off with what's the latest news?
So right as we were hitting record, I just double checked, and we don't know what their turn is, but just minutes ago, Oliver Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gourde have been traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning. So Yanni goes back to the city, to the team that he won 2 Stanley Cups with, the team that Seattle took from the expansion draft, which is kind of funny that he never signed. He's on the same contract, right? That he signed in Tampa Bay, and now he's back in Tampa Bay. Oliver Bjorkstrand also going. So that's the big one, because he is not an expiring free agent at the end of this year. He had a year left on his contract. So there's more, there's just more of a commitment to trading him. So that's huge. It was on everybody. Yeah, Yanni was on everybody's minds last night, and we can get into that. But so I'm just processing this. Like this is a bombshell. I mean, we've been talking about Yanni. You've been talking about Yanni. But honestly, I wasn't emotionally prepared for last night to be Bjorkstrand's last game as a Seattle Kraken.
No, not emotionally prepared. And there have been conversations regarding Bjorkstrand for the last handful of months, not because the Seattle Kraken necessarily wanted to offload him. I had an episode where I dang near pleaded for that not to be the case. We've talked about how I didn't like how maybe he was kind of an example of what started, right? A cascading effect of quote unquote resets, including the most recent Philip Grubauer, which again was the spirited conversation that we'll get to later. But yeah, for that to be Bjorkstrand's last game, I talked about it on an episode that went up a little bit earlier. I like his game. I like the kind of game that he can play for the Seattle Kraken when the Seattle Kraken are doing what they did against Vancouver, which is being strong on the forecheck. That is where he thrives. He can be a part of that game. But when the Seattle Kraken get a little lost in the sauce, like they did sometimes against the Minnesota Wild, that's where players like Oliver Bjorkstrand, they don't really sing in the same way. It hits a little different. So I would be heartbroken if the maestro is gone. Personally, I like his style. I like his game. That's the same with the Pepper Pot. But yeah, this is breaking news. It's that time of the season now. I am obligated as a journalist to note that we have not heard this news officially. So it's not officially official, as I like to say, from the Seattle Kraken, though in the world of sports media, all media, of course, we have those insiders that are often talking about things as they're developing through their very heavily curated and vetted sources. So it's not saying that it's not happening, but I do want to offer the caveat that this has not officially been announced by the Seattle Kraken. That being said, Zaiem, Oliver Bjorkstrand has been a part, not high at the top of the lists of the rumor mills, but he has been a part of trade conversations when it comes to the Seattle Kraken. This is a struggling team. We've known for a while that it was a long shot for them to make the playoffs, a lot because of their own doing, in my estimation, and I've been talking about that a lot on the show. So now you're getting to a point where this is a Seattle Kraken team that we heard, Lywicki say this is not a rebuild. That's what he said. I don't see the vision, but that's what he said. So this is a team that is still expecting to win games, and they haven't been doing that. So something's got to give. The Seattle Kraken are sellers at this particular point in time. And so what does this, big if true trade that we're hearing now, including Oliver Bjorkstrand, what does this signal to you with regard to where the Seattle Kraken see themselves for the remainder of the season, but specifically for the future?
If it looks like a rebuild and quacks like a rebuild, I mean the Kraken are at the near the very bottom of the standings, which is if you're gonna have a really bad season, be really bad, is my opinion.
Exactly.
So, the draft is like 4 heavy. So if they end up in the top 4, that's a really good break point, as opposed to like previous drafts where it was like Bedard was the prize and Celebrity's one. Yeah. So, but I mean, if you're trading somebody who has term, I mean, if Tanev and Gourde, they're expiring free agents, so that makes total sense. But if you're trading Bjorkstrand and Jamie Alexiak, not that I'm saying Jamie Alexiak is being traded, and also to your point,
it's been a part of the conversation, though.
Yes, Jaden Schwartz, Alexiak, those players with like a year left on their deal, then now this really signals, okay, you know what, we're getting rebuild, or the return for this purported trade was so high that Ron Francis was like, well, I can't turn down this kind of value.
Yeah.
You're right, though, that not only have we not heard this from the Kraken, but it looks, well, okay, as I say this, I say even Elliot Friedman has not said this, but Elliot Friedman says, understand key part return is 2 first-round picks from the Lightning and the Kraken. Again, so this is...
That's exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah, okay. So in that case, maybe not. If you're getting 2 first-round picks, that's a good return. I mean, that's a good return.
That's huge, because earlier today, you and I, we knew we were going to record this. We did not know that news would literally be breaking. But again, we should have probably anticipated that. But I'm glad I went with my gut, and I was like, you know what? Let me get the Minnesota loss and all of that analysis out of the way, right? We're still going to talk about Yanni Gourde because I want to get your reactions to what he said, but we've talked to viewers about that. But ended that episode, the earlier, I guess now Wednesday episode, with saying that some of the hypotheticals didn't make sense for the Seattle Kraken. The highest value back for the Kraken that I was seeing was maybe a young defenseman and a 3rd-round pick. And that was actually the hypothetical of Oliver Bjorkstrand, not to Tampa Bay, and certainly not bundled with Yanni Gourde, but that was with a hypothetical trade where Bjorkstrand goes back to Columbus. But I remember thinking, like, is this where we're at? Is this the best that we can get? But if you're going to put Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand, for all the reasons that I've already mentioned, some of the reasons that you've already mentioned, if you're going to package that, yes, first rounders is exactly what we should be talking about here.
Yeah, so I guess our viewers get to watch us react to this information real time. This is fun.
Let's go. That's the trade deadline.
So maybe not then. Maybe they don't know what the plan is. Maybe they're going to see how the rest of things shake out. Or maybe this is just step 1 of several, and they're taking calls on Alexiak and Jaden Schwartz and Jared McCann. Who knows, right? So Tanev certainly seems gone for sure. Yeah. But so we can talk about last night.
Yeah, and we can get to that in the next segment. I want to just tie a ribbon on this as we're literally reacting to what we are hearing is going to be news that the Seattle Kraken are offloading Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I want to think about what Yanni Gourde, because you were at the game. You were in the locker room and listening to the post-game conversations. But not only was that Yanni Gourde's first game back, and I had been talking a lot about that, everyone saying March 4th, March 4th, March 4th, and also saying Yanni's ability to play in that game and to compete in that game seemed like an important piece to what the Seattle Kraken were going to be able to do at the trade deadline. So first, let's talk about Zaiem. What you witnessed with regard to Yanni's comeback, and then in the next segment we'll play clips from him. But I want to get your reactions. The Pepper Pot back on the ice. What did you see? What did you like? What did he say after the game?
So Yanni, it was his first game since I think January 2nd, and he was Yanni Gourde. I mean, it was really, really. He was going really hard in practice, so it was not a complete surprise to see him go full strength, or full bore. But Yanni looked like Yanni Gourde. He was getting in there. He was forechecking. He was creating problems. He did have like one giveaway that led to a Minnesota goal, but which he acknowledged in the post game. But then he also had a steal behind the net to set up a goal for the Kraken, and he was just being a pest and going into the corners and winning puck battles and forechecking and forechecking and forechecking. And you're showcasing him to other teams to say, hey, look, this is somebody who can be a proven playoff performer, someone who's great in the locker room. And the only question is, well, he's missed so much time the last few months. Can he play? And the answer is, yeah, he can play. He is Yanni Gourde. And that's what the Tampa Bay Lightning, that's who they're getting back. They're getting the guy that they know they can win Stanley Cups with. And they see he's healthy. And now it's not a coincidence that less than 14 hours later, he's on a plane to Florida.
Yeah, that's what we're hearing. But I want to ask you, being at that game, being in the locker room, did it seem like a farewell?
Oh, it sure did. It was a weird energy. When he took the ice, there was a big cheer, and we're sitting up there in the press bridge, and we're thinking, okay, this is probably Yanni Gourde's last home game. And then when we got down to the locker room, I was sure that he was going to be one of the two skaters the two players they brought out. And sure enough, you see the 37 on the whiteboard. And the questions and answers were pretty standard for the most part. How did you feel? What was going on this? But usually after these games, especially after losses, you get like 2 questions, maybe 3 questions, and then people just don't really have anything to say. Here it was clear that there was this energy of like, if we stop asking questions, this is the last time we will ever see Yanni Gourde like face to face in person. This is the last time that Yanni Gourde will stand in this locker room and be great with the media as he has been all 4 years. And he's been such a gem to have. And it was just like, people are like, okay, hey, Yanni, what did you think about, so how did you play about this? And there was just this really bizarre, like, nobody wants to let go. And as media, we're supposed to be impartial, and we present as impartial, but of course we're around these people. We're humans, they're humans. You think about him and him moving his family and just having his daughter around, in the locker room, like after games and after practices. And I remember the Winter Classic. And it's just there was like a sadness, but it was like we can't present to be sad, so we have to just like be professional, but there was a pall over it. It was a really, really strange feeling, especially because I think the players and the coach, they felt like they played pretty well, and I agree. I mean, they lost a game to Minnesota, but it wasn't like they played poorly. It was just like there were both two teams that played pretty well, and Minnesota was just maybe a little better. And so like the mood was like, hey, we played well, we did good, but then there was this other thing. It was so weird. It was just so weird, Erica.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to give you an opportunity because again, the questions that I'm able to receive post game morning skate I'm getting vibes in a different way than you were being there. But I want to play this clip. We played it on the episode earlier today. Let's hear some of the last moments, or what we think may be the last moments of Yanni Gourde in the home locker room at Climate Pledge Arena.
You're just getting back, but your name has been out there a lot in trade conversation. How do you handle that? How do you approach the next few days?
I'm focusing on what I can control, and that's not. I can control showing up tomorrow, working hard, and that's all I can control, and that's what I'm focused on, and we'll see what happened in the next few days.
I mean, last year they got Ebbs done with an extension right before the trade deadline. Is that something they've broached with you at all up to this point?
We've. There's been communication, but yeah, that's all I'm going to say for now.
Thanks, Yanni.
That's all we got from Yanni Gourde with regard at least to the trade deadline. I loved what he talked about getting after it on the ice. You mentioned it. Yanni Gourde did say he went extra hard in his practices so that he was ready for games. But I think I mildly disagree with you with regard to this game for the Seattle Kraken. And I did talk about that on an earlier episode. This game to me, in a silo, sure, Minnesota beats them. But in the context of this season, to hear Yanni Gourde in his return to the ice, once again, a Seattle Kraken player say, part of the reason that we lost this game is because we did not focus on the details. And that is endlessly frustrating, especially because had they paid attention to a few more details, perhaps, Zaiem, in the first period, the surge that they had in the third might have at least gotten them an equalizer, but they effectively ran out of time. So again, we've talked about that from a broad strokes perspective on Locked on Kraken, talked about it earlier today, but Zaiem and I are going to stick with you and be, clacking on our keyboards to see any updates, as in real time of us recording this episode of Locked on Kraken, we are hearing that Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand are headed to Tampa Bay. The Seattle Kraken will receive 2 first-round picks. We'll talk about whatever transpires in the next 15 20 minutes and some other things on today's episode of Locked on Kraken. And this wild and crazy episode, Zaiem, of Locked on Kraken, brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Now, we know that the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that action than at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association and us here at the Locked On Podcast Network. All right. Thanks as always for making Locked on Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here alongside Zaiem Beg. And if you're somehow just tuning in to this episode on video or audio, again, we are hearing in real time at the time of this recording that Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand headed to Tampa Bay. Now, we've alluded to this, Zaiem, that Yanni Gourde pretty much seemed like he was getting moved. In that clip that we played in the first segment, he did say that there were at least conversations about an extension, but that's all he was going to say about that. But we also know that he was high on the list, it seemed like, to be moved. Brandon Tanev, I mean, we didn't even get, I've been talking about this on the show, Zaiem, we didn't even get a chance to have that reflection time with Dan Bilesma or even to hear from Tanev in the last handful of days. So we'll see if and how that trade goes. But this is your chance, Zaiem. I've been waxing poetic, talking about all of the rumors. And now, of course, you come on the show and we get some serious action. Let's talk a little bit about the broader picture here for the Seattle Kraken. What do you see the Kraken needing at this trade deadline? And how does that fit with some of the predictions that you had? Well, at least until we started recording, and then we heard what was going down with Gourde and Bjorkstrand.
I know that previously the Kraken have said that they're not interested in doing a rebuild, but if you're Yanni Gourde and Brandon Tanev, sure, their contracts are expiring, and so that's an obvious trade candidate. But if you're trading Oliver Bjorkstrand, you're trading one of your productive forwards who has a year left on his contract at a very reasonable cost. You're probably not looking to make the playoffs next year. You're probably not doing the big free agent signing this summer to be like, we want to be competitive right away. I mean, maybe the value was just too much to pass, and maybe they're looking at Berkeley Catton and they're saying, okay, he's ready to be here next year. I don't know, but it sure seems like the Kraken understand that the roster as constructed is just not anywhere near good enough. And, maybe, and the expansion draft is what it was. And this idea of running 4 second lines, we have 4 second lines. And that was, that was okay. There was obviously the one playoff season where it all came together, but it's just not a way hockey teams are usually built. And we're kind of seeing what happens when they are. So they should be reimagining the entire roster construction. I mean, Beniers, Wright, and Taco are your future, and Berkeley, and then also Joey, those have been the best players on the team this year. So, which is nice when your young players and your future are also the best. But now that signals to them that, okay, maybe we have something we can build around, and we don't have to build around, Jared McCann and Jordan Eberle and these original Kraken who they're getting up there in age. So I am excited for the future. I think the next couple of years might be rough, but we've also had a last couple of years that have been rough. So really, how much worse can it get? And words no one's ever said and regretted. And we'll see where they go, but it's just the idea heading into the season that like we need to compete and we need to be ready right away has just completely not come together. And it's smart of them to pivot if that's what's going on. Rather than try to sunk costs and be like, we're going to really make this plan that clearly doesn't work. That's how you just dig yourself a deeper hole. So it seems like at least they realize they're in a hole. Stop digging. Let's go find a different hole to dig ourselves into.
I mean, I agree with everything that you're saying. And my visceral reaction is because I just don't understand how the movers and shakers, so I'm talking the front office of the Seattle Kraken, didn't realize this before. The Seattle Kraken and very specifically, Ron Francis has been criticized even with his kind of glacial pace when it comes to making moves. Conservative, calculated. I mean, these are all kind of adjectives that we sometimes hear to describe his style. And I've even said, I just at what point are we going to say that there's just some disconnect between whatever the vision and the goal is of this team and the roster construct, right? So on the one hand, I guess I'm grateful that we got here. On the other hand, I can't help, Zaiem, but wonder if some of the moves that we made were a little bit they came at a time where the franchise itself, was still confused as to if we are a win now, a win in 3 to 5, or a complete rebuild. And I think that we've done things in the last handful of months that might align in all of those categories, which means to me that, again, the vision got lost, I would say, really after that playoff run. I've said it before. We arrived earlier than expected. Now, what does the front office do to keep the promise of when we make the playoffs, we're staying in the playoffs? That hasn't happened. Not even close.
And I wonder how much of this is just Ron Francis seems really, really good at extracting value and draft capital and trades. The drafts have been really good. Speaking of value, I have good news for you. So the return for Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gourde is in. Okay. It's better.
Ooh. Okay.
So they get a first round pick in 26 and 27.
Okay.
They also get Toronto's second round pick in 2025, and then Michael Eyssimont as a depth piece, and then they send a fifth round pick to Tampa Bay back. So they're essentially getting a first, a second, or two firsts and a second.
Yeah.
So okay, now even if you're not planning on trading Bjorkstrand, if that's the offer you're getting, I mean you take it, right? So, but this is exactly what I'm talking about. Oliver Bjorkstrand was acquired by taking advantage of Columbus's bad cap situation.
Yep.
When they signed Eric Gudbranson to a big deal, and so and Seattle just pounced on that. They're opportunistic. Remember they pounced on Ellie Tolvanen. And like the trades they get, the return they get at the trade deadline every year is like, wow, Seattle kind of got a lot back. Yeah. Jeremy Lauzon for a second round pick, I remember was like I really thought that I misheard and thought they said seventh instead of second, because that's where he was going to go, right?
Right.
So this aspect, which is super critical of roster construction, drafting, and developing, is I think Ron Francis seems exceptional at. Mm-hmm. But then when it comes to putting together the NHL roster,
yes,
and making all those pieces fit, I think that's really where he really struggles. And this is where we are, where the team isn't good, the roster isn't good, but man, that prospect pool is great. And that draft capital, there's a lot of it. So, how do you connect, point A, point B? And also not, for nothing, this is what happened in Carolina as well. That team is very good based a lot on what Ron Francis did with this drafting and development, but he was not the one to make the final thing to coalesce them into a Stanley Cup contender like they are now.
And I mean, he's kind of put us on notice of that, right, Zaiem? He said, how many times have we heard, the old, well, no one really wants to be the first GM, because this is the heat that you get. And just like that, we got the official announcement in our inboxes, Zaiem, as you and I are on our 107th segment of this episode, this endless episode. The Seattle Kraken have acquired a 2026 and 27 first-round pick, a 25 second pick, and forward Michael Eyssimont in exchange for forwards Oliver Bjorkstrand, Yanni Gourde, and a 26 fifth-round pick. 3-team trade includes Tampa Bay Lightning and the Detroit Red Wings. This is what we're hearing. The quote in the press release: Oliver and Yanni were tremendous players for our organization who led by example on and off the ice, and I wish them all the best in their next chapter with the Lightning. Decisions like these are never easy, but creating this valuable cap space, wink, wink, we talked about it, and draft capital, hello, allows us to be active in improving our team moving forward. In addition, we welcome Michael Eyssimont to the group. He's a versatile, hardworking forward who can join our lineup immediately. All right, Zaiem, it's officially official. What are your thoughts?
Did you catch that there is salary retention, which we didn't get initially?
Oh, I see it. Gourde was originally traded to Detroit at a 50% salary retention.
Okay, so there was salary retention, but no salary retention on Bjorkstrand, then presumably. I mean, clearly
looks that way. Yep.
So salary retention on Gourde is like whatever, because that's just for this year. Salary retention on Bjorkstrand will cost them next year,
right?
So that's great. Wow. Okay. So yeah, it's official. It's official.
I mean, yeah. So we've been kind of talking about it this whole episode, and this is going to be quite the doozy of an edit here. But let's just reflect. We've done it a little bit, but now that the news is officially official, Zaiem, reflect a little on Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand.
I just think about the playoff here, and I think about how fun that was, and Yanni's overtime winner in Dallas. And just thinking, like, if you had a team where you had 12 Yanni Gourdes as your forwards, do you win the Stanley Cup? If you get to the playoffs and you just get the most tenacious, the most fierce, the most pepper potty roster, and if you just gave them a wave of endless Yanni Gourdes, that team, I think they would win the cup personally. The playoffs, they say it's a different game. I agree, and it's just Yanni Gourde is just like so fully embraces everything that involves being just the commitment for a deep playoff run and putting his body on the line and just never showing lack of energy and never giving up. And I'm really going to miss his tenacity. And then I'm going to miss Oliver Bjorkstrand's shot. Boy, what a shot. And his sellies, he would skate and just do the fist pump. And, he was just so expressive. It felt like a freebie when they got him because it was opportunistic. Because, maybe that's the difference with Ron Francis's good and bad decisions is all his really great ones are pretty opportunistic. It's like this opportunity came. This player was, they wanted to trade for this player. This trade came, and then they got value there.
Yeah.
So in one sense, like it felt like kind of stealing to have him in the first place.
Yeah.
And but it's just kind of the end, and I kind of accept that year 2 was probably a fluke, and that we're probably pretty far away from experiencing that again. And at least there was like a little bit of plausible deniability by having these good skaters on the roster and thinking like, maybe we can put together. But now that they're gone, now that Bjorkstrand's gone, now that Bjorkstrand's not going to be part of the forward core next year, they just have holes to fill, and it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
This roster just isn't it, but
it's not. And I mean, some acknowledgement in that statement. I'm going to read it again. Decisions like these are never easy, but creating this valuable cap space and draft capital allows us to be active in improving our team moving forward. That is from Ron Francis. I agree with a lot of what you said there. I'm a huge fan of Ollie's game. It's not that I'm not a fan of Yanni's game, but you said it all. The pepper pot. I would dose up on so many Yanni Gourdes if we could, but you need a player like Oliver Bjorkstrand to play alongside a player like Yanni Gourde with that tenacity, because Oliver has that finesse and finish. Yanni certainly can do that as well, but he puts in the work. So that's tough. And it goes back to a lot of what we've been saying on this very long episode, that you summarized by saying, this doesn't seem like a team that can hide the fact that they're rebuilding, right? Another thing worth noting here, and that I'd like you to react to, conditions on the first round picks, which is important. If the 2026 or 27 pick becomes a 28 pick due to being in the top 10, Seattle receives an additional third round pick in 2028. If both picks slide to 2028 and 29 respectively, Seattle receives a third round pick in 2028 and a third round pick in 29.
So Tampa Bay, because they don't have their 25 pick, they're sending 26 and 27 picks. If one of those finishes in the top 10, that gets deferred to 28.
Yes.
And then the second one finishes the top 10, this leads to 29. If that happens, then Seattle will get a third round pick in each of those years. So it's top 10 protected, slides, but if it slides, they get a third round pick. It looks like that's what that is on there. So
yeah. So there's some waiting that still has to, some sorting that still has to happen here. But again, this just points to the Seattle Kraken knowing that they had to make some moves. Again, editing this is going to be so much fun for me. But so this podcast will be a little bit out of chronological order here to get to the news, which is that Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand headed to Tampa Bay. Again, it's quite the laundry list of things, but the official is that the Kraken have acquired a 2026 and 2027 first round pick, a 2025 second round pick, and forward Michael Eyssimont in exchange for Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gourde. The 3-team trade includes the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Detroit Red Wings. And as Zaiem broke down, it's top 10 protected. So there are some conditions on those first round picks that we laid out, and we'll break down in the show notes a little bit more. Nashville next.